Hello, guys. Welcome back to another exciting episode on the show, Control or Be Controlled, a podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Today's guest is Rick, Rick Sorenson. Rick is an artist, author, teacher, and former international entrepreneur whose life has been dedicated to exploring creativity and its deeper purpose. A graduate of Montserrat College of Art and author of Art, the Church Response. Rick has spent decades helping people rediscover their God given creativity through teaching children, adults, and churches. He discovered that many creative struggles aren't about talent, but they are rooted in fears and limiting beliefs formed in childhood. Today, we will explore creativity, faith, art, and how anyone can overcome those barriers to create with confidence. Rick, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much, Rick. So I have some questions there for you, and I would like us to get into them.
All right.
Okay, so share with us what first inspired your lifelong passion for art, and how did growing up as a pastor's kid shaped your creativity?
Well, I've always loved art from the time I can remember, really. Um, Even from age 6, I, I thought that I would be an artist. So it was always something in my mind. So, um, and my parents always encouraged any creative thing that we did. So my dad was a musician. And so in elementary school, I started to learn to play the trumpet because that was what he had. And so I used, or I took that up as well. And um, then I learned how to play guitar too, but I really didn't like to practice. So, um, you know, music just didn't stay with me because of that. Um, I can appreciate it, but I just never pursued it. It wasn't until I was in middle school that um, what I call a mature journey happened for me, where I began to learn to draw in a mature way, not just as children do. And so the teacher kind of used a Renaissance method, and so to teach us. So what he did was they put a white ball on a table with a white piece of paper under it. He turned out all the lights in the room, covered all the windows, and then shone one light down upon the ball at a 45-degree-ish angle. And then he kind of began to demonstrate to us what was going on with the light. And so we weren't really just drawing the simple ball. What we were doing was studying light. And um, then over time, he added other objects to the table, and would then we learned how to draw cow bones. And so it's not just kind of drawing, skill. Drawing is a skill that you build up, but it was learning how to see what was past the surface to what light was doing. And so that began my love of being creative in an artistic sense.
All right, Rick, thank you so much. So my next question for you is this: so your book is titled "Art: The Church Response." Why did you feel the church needed this conversation?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, the normal response in the United States to that Christians have to the arts is mixed. It's one of wanting to do it, but also not understanding it. And so I wrote this to break down some of that misunderstanding. Um, so it, and because I was writing it to Christians, then I began to think, what is it Christians would want to know about this topic? And so the main thing would be, well, what does the Bible say about it? So I began to look at what the Bible says about various aspects of creating and other uh, art topics as it touches on in the Bible. So basically, the Bible is positive about um, how it looks at the arts, and so kind of it all begins in Genesis. In Genesis 1:1, it says God, or in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so so I looked up that word create in the Hebrew. And so it means to create as a process. So this verse isn't just, we often think of this verse as a report of something that happened. But this is really the first place that God reveals himself to man, is as creator. And then in breaking down the what that word means, we can look at this a little more deeply. It's not just we create something, but there was a process God used to bring about the heavens and the earth. So that makes us think about things differently because now we're looking at what it really means. And then, because you asked about, why, so that a few verses later, it says, "Let us make man in our own image." Now, part of that image, as we just saw in the first verse of the Bible, is that God is creator. So he's going to make us now in his own image. And so that means that he's putting that creator aspect into our image that that he made us to be like. So that means that we have to create. It's just so ingrained into us. We have to do it. And if you think about it, everything around us was created. It started in someone's imagination and then was brought into reality. Everything that you see, you know, from houses to um, the big cities, everything started in someone's imagination. And even thinking about the development of civilization, it all started in someone's imagination and grew with each idea. And so being creative is just so ingrained into us. We have to do it. But most people believe that they're not creative. So how how did this happen? That's what some of what I started to research.
Okay, thank you so much, Rick. So, uh, tell us people, why you believe many people are not creative, and how can they be able to overcome that mindset?
Well, there's a couple reasons for it. Um, One is that society will tell us that only the special people are creative, and um, there's a lot of reasons for it. Um, if if you've ever seen an old movie called Sister Act 2 with Whoopi Goldberg, in it she played. So I bring this movie up because it kind of typifies how this whole area of how society tries to um, suppress creativity in most people. And so in the movie, Whoopi Goldberg plays a, a nun. She's not a nun in the movie. She's asked to be a music teacher in a Catholic school, and so she has to put on, a nun's outfit. And so what she discovers is that there's a girl who can sing very, very well, and she encourages her to sing, to become part of the school choir. But the mother doesn't want her to sing. The reason is that um, the girl's father had been a musician but never succeeded, and she didn't want that to happen to her daughter. And so, the mother's fear for her daughter is one of the reasons that you see this in the movie. And uh, she does everything she can to keep this girl from the the music that this girl loves. And it gets where the girl has to disobey her mother and sneak out in order to go to choir. And so the end of the movie is this big competition of schools, and the mother is going to go and drag her daughter out of the competition. But then she hears her daughter sing, and she's there's reconciliation between mother and daughter because the mother now realizes how good of a singer she is, and she's not going to hold her back anymore. Well, those type of things happen in life all the time. This movie is just kind of depicting that in a fun way for a movie. But you can see that all throughout society where there's different authority figures that will say, "Oh, you can't do that. That's not for you." And then the other part of it is that um, there's a biological development that people go through that can reinforce this. Um, Psychologists have discovered this through watching children, and drawing has been the main way that they're able to track this in children. So between ages 8 to 10, the child's brain is now developing and maturing, and it begins to move from concrete thinking, where a child is saying, "Well, this is this," and it's now beginning to move into the brain is growing, and the brain develops into abstract thinking, where we say, "This is that," and so the child's drawing before this transition time, they are drawing from their inner language. They're all the stuff going on inside them is what they're depicting. And so you can look at a child's drawing and you say, "Oh, that's a nice, whatever it is." And they say, "Oh, that's not that." And they give this big scenario going on and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I see it." It doesn't matter the culture. This kind of thing happens with adults to children at that stage all the time. But now, as they begin to transition into more mature thinking, they're looking now outside of themselves into the outer world into a way that they haven't done before, and they see either something on a shelf, they'll see um, a picture out of a magazine, and they want to draw it and it look like that. And if they now, as they draw it and it doesn't look like what they see, they get frustrated, but they'll keep trying. And over time, if the frustration will grow with each attempt, and and if they can't do it, then eventually the frustration gets a saturation point in them, and they say, "Oh, I can't do it." So and they hate it. So that's usually around age 10. ish. And so um, the n- now children are often doing many things at once during this time. They're, they're not only drawing, but they may be learning how to play a musical instrument. They may be involved in learning dance or some other creative thing. And so if they can't in their mind they can't draw, then they will put all their creative energy into some other creative area that they're already doing. But if they are not doing that, then they do what I call the quitting stage, where they quit being creative itself because they associate drawing with being creative. And so, so the result of this decision at such a young age is they cut off the creative portion of their soul, saying, I can't do it. The And so then society will reinforce this decision, saying, well, only the special people can do it. And they'll say, yes, that's right, because I can't do it, so it must be only the special people can do it. But that's not really true. That's just a lie that they've come to believe about themselves. And so that's that's what I discovered in the research about creativity is that we are creative. It's in the very fiber of our being, but there's things both inside of us and outside of us that are trying to keep us from being creative.
Okay, so Rick,
Yes,
you built an international business importing handmade paper from Bhutan, right?
yes.
What lessons did entrepreneurship teach you about creativity and purpose?
Well, how I became a businessman was after I graduated from art school, I went on a tour of Asia with my father. And as part of, so we went to several countries. And so one of the countries we went to was Bhutan, which is a landlocked country. It's a Buddhist kingdom. And you probably have heard about it in the news is that their big thing is that the happiness quotient is their overriding thing in Bhutan. So it's um, so as part of the tour, then we went to this handmade paper factory, which that's just a hut that was um, used to or a house got converted into this manufacturing place, and so um, the quality was very good. But I was not thinking as a businessman. I was thinking that I was going to be pursuing art in my life. So, um, but I really liked the quality of this paper. It was very, very good. And so, my I'm telling my dad how great this paper is, and I'm in front of the factory owner as I'm doing this. In Bhutan, um, they speak English, so he understood what I was saying. And so my dad asked me, you know, who would I, who else that I know would like this? And I said, well, just about every artist I know. And he said, well, why don't I import it? So that began a thinking process in me that, you know, I didn't have before. I wasn't thinking about doing business, but I began to, so to make a long story short, I did business because I didn't want to have what would have happened if I didn't. I rather try and fail instead of, you know, always wondering what would have happened. So that's the reason I did business. So I had no business background. I had to learn it as I went. And of course, I made lots of mistakes along the way. So I had my business for 13 years until the economy crashed in the United States. And um, so what I learned is that I had to be just as creative as a business person as I was as an artist. So creativity involves problem solving, but that's not the only aspect of it. There's um, also scientists have discovered in trying to understand creativity, they've recognized the problem solving aspect. But then they see another part of creativity is that we will take something and reapply it in a different way. That's a creative use of it. So in business, that happens all the time. The, an example of that is um, the person that invented Velcro. He was a Swiss engineer. He was out taking his dog for a walk out in, the woods. And there were these burrs that attached to his pant legs and to the dog. And so he was just curious, as a lot of engineers are. And so he looked at um, the burrs on his pants under the microscope, and he discovered that at the end of the burr, there's this little hook. It's not just a straight point that goes out, but there's a little hook at the end of it. And it cut into the holes of his pant legs, how the of the cloth. And so that began to spur on him a different way of thinking about things. And so the idea of Velcro came to his mind. And so he reapplied what he saw in nature and put it into something useful that we use today. So, in thinking about create, being creative, then you're going to be using both of these aspects all the time in business. You'll be looking at what works and what doesn't work. You'll problem solve to get um, past the hurdle that is coming up, and then you're looking for. Um, see, I found that what business is basically you're providing a need, and so in providing that need, you are, are you're helping your customers in what they're needing. That's what grocery stores do. They they provide grocery products for everybody in a convenient way. That's a need. So if you look at what the needs are of people, you'll start to see that there's areas that don't always get addressed. And so all business amounts to is now you're going to help supply a need for people. And so that's what I discovered that business really is about, is just, giving a product or a service in a way that will help people. And then when you help people, then you'll succeed because everybody succeeds in that way.
Okay, Rick. So, tell us what separates a good art from truly great or timeless art?
Um, yeah, I could probably talk our whole time just about that aspect alone. The main thing that separates just something that someone does to something that will stand the test of time. We may call it a masterpiece in language, but it's that it has the life. The, the, the creator has imparted life into the work. And so if you think about things that we still experience today, but were made like 500 years ago, whether some of the great composers in Europe, the or the great paintings that have you go to the museums around the world to look at, someone like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci or someone of that time, they lived 500 years ago. But we can go and look at their work and experience the same experience that the audience of its time experienced. Go to the Louvre in Paris and look at the Mona Lisa that Leonardo da Vinci painted. And so, so I went to see that when and what amazed me when I saw the Mona Lisa was that there's this life to it that captures you. It's not just this picture of this woman, but it has this vitality to it. And that vitality is what keeps people wanting to see it. It's not so much that it's famous, even though that's what, some people will go see that because it's famous. But Leonardo put this vitality into this picture. Or if you listen to a composer like Beethoven, if we listen to his music, we can have that same experience as the audience who first listened to it. We're going to hear what he put into it, but we'll also experience the emotion he put into it just in the same way that the original audience did. So there's a vitality that's put into works. And I learned about this from reading about Chinese painting. Chinese painting is based upon um, one main principle is that the work has life to it. If it doesn't have life or vitality, then we're not going to respond to it. And and then the second principle that contributes to that is that it's through the artist's hand is where the vitality is imparted. And so if the work, but in the West we don't use those terms. We'll maybe say, does the work have life? Does it? Or I've heard people ask, does it breathe? And these are all terms that we're trying to say, does it have this energy that keeps capturing us every time we look at it, every time we experience the work? You can experience the same thing in stories, in movies. That there's this vitality that happens in movies that we go, oh, that is so great. We may not even have words to know how to say it. But then we see other movies and go, oh, well, that's just a movie. There's something that's missing in that movie where the other movie that captures us and going, oh, this is so great. Like, why is it so great? Because it has that vitality that captures us, and we don't even have the words to describe why it does that, but we respond to it because it does. And we dismiss the ones that don't have that.
All right. So Rick, how can parents, teachers, and churches better encourage creativity in children instead of unintentionally suppressing it?
Well, children are naturally creative. It's, they can't help it. Their their whole being vibrates with creativity. You know, they can have just a stick and they're playing with somebody, and you know that becomes this big thing. Kids are always making up. So playing is actually a, a great means for children to be creative, and they're always wanting to play. I mean, they're not only learning as they play, but most play involves being creative in some aspect for children. So encouraging that, not suppressing that. Um, Always encourage children in attempting things. You know, as we grow older, we start to think that we have to do it just perfectly, or we can't do it. Well, children don't think that until they get older. You know, and sometimes school reinforces this idea that uh, there's only one way to do things. You know, tests show that there's only one right answer. But when you're creative, there's many right answers to a solution. There's many ways to approach how you do things, and they're all correct. You'll find the one that works a little bit better than others, but basically, always, when you're creative, you're always looking at different things in different ways. And that's what really being creative is about, is not thinking the same way as everyone else, but you're thinking differently. And because we're thinking differently, then that will come out in different ways, in some of arts and stories, in music. It will come out in business, because now you discover that there's something missing in, in society, that if you do this, that will now start to help everybody. So encouraging kids to think differently and not the same, to always try to discover, because creativity is essentially about discovering. Just so um, don't don't think the same as everyone else, but discover all the various ways that things can happen.
All right, Rick. So, is there a question you wish I would have asked you that I have not asked you?
Um, no, you were hitting a lot of, I think, good things. Um, I think for adults, it would be that you need to be courageous to be creative. For some people, it takes a lot more courage than others, because of the fears that have happened from the time they were children. The and you know, when we're creative in some way, we become more truly human. We're not. We open ourselves up to life, where um, if we're not, we begin to close down. We our thinking becomes more limited. Our emotions become smaller. The it, you know, our fears n- now shape us instead of us shaping ourselves through life. And so, to be courageous, to step out, to be creative, begins to open up a whole world that we never thought was possible. So I would say that would be um, probably what I would say. You know, as adults, open yourself up to be creative.
Okay. For those who would like to connect with you, how can they?
Um, you can go to my author's website, which is The Lanyap Life, and I have some articles that I put on there, as well as you can get my book there. You can find me on Amazon as well to get my book. So, yeah, the articles that you'll see on my author's page is dealing more with the um, trying to understand the nature of creating itself. So that's some of what I have been looking at is the nature of creating.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you for coming. Thank you, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.
Oh, thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye, bye. I love you guys so much. I'll see you guys.